This talk was submitted in spring, and at the time I was very pissed off because there were a number of discussions going on Twitter, and they were about things like font pricing and discounts, and more generally the fact that everything that some people don't like in the font business is caused by monotype. And well, don't get me start talking about that. So I propose to talk about the A, B, and C of type, art, business, and culture. For the reasons of concept, I turned the order around. And so there we go. The letters are white, and the background is cool gray here. Many of you know me as a typographic professional with 3 hats on. I'm an author, editor, and translator of basically serious books and some not so serious, like the one on the right about type design and graphic design. I am, so to speak, a professional typewriter. I'm also a commercial typewriter as a consultant and chief editor of MyFonts newsletters and websites. And for 3 years now, I have also been MyFonts principal gatekeeper. And I briefly talked about that during the bestsellers talk yesterday. And I'm also a book and magazine and occasionally poster designer. This is a poster that I made 10 years ago for an exhibition that I organized in Dubai when I was teaching there for a brief period in the American University. So I have dealt with the A, B, and C of type in various capacities, as a user, as a critic, and as a kind of evangelist and salesman. And then after submitting this thing, there were a couple of things that changed my mind about the talk. It started in May when at Typo Berlin, Peter Bielak presented FontStand, a new kind of retail platform, welcomed by a whole group of independent foundries, among which there were a few that would never have been caught alive with any other distributor. And Peter started his talk with something that I would have wanted to do, namely a short introduction about business and type. And he started with this guy called Johannes Fust, the guy who bankrolled Gutenberg, then sued him, had his equipment confiscated, and poached his assistant to become his workshop manager and son-in-law. At this point, all this to point out, just as like I was going to do, that the type trade has always been a tricky balancing act between invention, business, and soap opera. While it is a bit early to discuss the success of FontStand, it is certainly not too early to discuss the business of type, as well as the way we can help the market diversify again. But we have already discussed type business at length during this conference, during Indra Kupferschmidt's Q&A in the first day, during the lectures of our friends from Prague, in the bestseller project, and in many conversations. And also Stephen Coles will add his expertise during the final keynote speech. I will briefly repeat a few standpoints at the end of this talk, but the business part has sort of been reduced very much, and this will certainly not be a comprehensive overview of any of those problematics at all. So I decided to make this a more personal talk. I've never shown as much of my own work as I will today. I will ask some questions that have been bugging me lately about fonts and the font or typography culture, and I'll be weaving in part of the work that I did with MyFonts. Not because I'm eager to advertise MyFonts. I don't represent MyFonts right now. I represent myself. But I'd like to tell you how I try to use my position to do something about contribute something meaningful to the typographic culture. So, what is the state of the art of typography and type? Well, on one level, I think the state of the professional letter form design, I would like to extend it a bit to stuff like lettering and logos, is magnificent. Our craft, if I may use that sort of romantic word, has never been better informed, technically more sophisticated. Never before did young designers and students have access to such a broad array of techniques, from manual skills to programming generative type. Never have they been as eager to learn about both things at the same time, seeing them as crafts that complement each other instead of being competitors. And we have incredible knowledge of everything that came before us. We are aware of almost any style or technique from the past. There are no more modernist laws about what is permitted and what is not, and the entire history of letter forms feeds into today's ideas and decisions. Then on a more technical level, everything hunky-dory as well. New applications, new intercultural connections have been brought to us, a global view of type production. We can now combine most of the world's writing systems into one font, encoded to work across platforms. Individuals have written apps and scripts to produce type faster, more precisely, automating many steps. For those who are curious and want to dig deep, there is a toolkit here that has no precedent. Now for the paradox. As type design gets better and better, and its technical sophistication is driving the possibilities to visualize text to new levels, and the design of letter forms is becoming a topic in newspapers and popular fiction, there is also more bullshit happening. Font bullshit and font rubbish. Part of this is due to how the internet works and what it does to people's minds. There is a book called The Shallows, which describes, in a somewhat shallow way, how internet interaction rewires our minds. It reduces our attention span, it lowers our bars, it makes us analyze in more superficial ways and think in one-liners. Students suffer from Googleitis, and if they're a bit more ambitious, from Wikipeditis. They replace books and memory by quick searches. Young creatives count the number of likes on Behance to decide whether they have talent and success. People with very immature insights into what it takes to make something good or to make design at all boost each other's self-esteem by giving each other's thumbs ups for work that's based on work by others, seen on the web. If something doesn't suck, then it's awesome. It's also in the teaching. I think type design should be taught a bit more like music. If you know to enter a music academy or a conservatory, you're supposed to already play an instrument well, have given proof of perfect hearing, in some countries even perfect pitch, have an unquestionable understanding of music and music history. In typographic design, you don't even have to show these kinds of skills and knowledge to become a teacher. As a designer, I am self-taught. It keeps me surprising how little people know and how little people want to know about the history and backgrounds and principles of design, and how little curious they are. But they can become professors at an art university, and I cannot. I do have a degree in something else, and that helps too. I'll come back to that later. So, as a consultant for MyFonts, I've had a first-hand experience of how the stream of rubbish is growing, and also of the different kinds of attitude with which these things are offered. Some of the people that offer themselves to MyFonts are open-minded and humble, and those are usually the ones with talent, or they are unbearably arrogant, and those are often hopeless. This is very interesting, what's happening on my screen. You're not seeing that. Okay, so this is the slide that goes with what I just said. When I began working for MyFonts 8 years ago, I was surprised to see that there was no quality filter whatsoever. This was not stupidity. Part of this had been the result of commercial thinking, and part of it had been idealism. When MyFonts started out around 2000, they wanted to offer a large and very broad collection of fonts very fast. But there was this idealism also about being an open, level playing field for type designers, and that's also due to the fact that when MyFonts started, they were created by Bitstream. Nobody on the team had much understanding about type design. They were engineers and they were organizers. So for customers, they wanted to make shopping for fonts easier, which was very logical to do, because in the 90s, when you had to shop for fonts, you had to know the names, know where they came from, know the designers. And the guys at Bitstream that wanted to create MyFonts said, I want to look for a festive font, and then without knowing anything, find something nice. For designers, they wanted to be that level playing field where established foundries and beginning type designers had equal opportunities to offer typefaces. This allowed many young designers to forget about signing up with an existing foundry, to wait for some typeboard to design and just go for it. So I think MyFonts did something positive there. They changed the landscape, allowing a lot of young designers to find an audience immediately with their own foundry. MyFonts wanted to be neutral and open, but that is kind of difficult in the type world. You cannot be the Amazon.com of type. Nobody thinks that Amazon.com are stupid because they offer bad books. It's just there. They're a warehouse. In the typographic world, a retailer is supposed to be a kind of guardian of quality. MyFonts was seen to endorse a lot of mediocre and superfluous stuff. So soon after I joined the company in 2007, oh my God, did that happen long ago? Okay, so this is, yeah, 2 minutes time out. So I joined MyFonts. I came from working as a freelancer and doing some magazines for FontShop. I'll show some of that. And I joined the company in 2007, and I saw how more and more people came to MyFonts. And Nick Sherman had just made a wonderful website. All the stupidity had gone from the MyFonts side. And so we received more good stuff from foundries who started taking MyFonts more seriously, but also more rubbish, because many immature type designers, even clueless hobbyists, signed up in the hope of making a quick buck. So I and a few people in the team began pushing in our friendly and non-confrontational way for quality control. And it took us years to turn things around and start thinking differently about this. So in late 2012, I was given the go-ahead to start the Foundry review process. I put together a review team of type specialists. Those are Joshua Lurie-Terrell and Tiffany Warder in California. And in Berlin, where I live, Dan Reynolds and Florian Hardwick joined the team. All of us very much part-time. Our main goal was to accept only stuff that is good and usable and give personalized and detailed feedback to talented designers whose work needs improvement. So, it's been 3 years this month since we started, and I'll give you some numbers. In that period, we had exactly 1,100 applications, 1,100. So I hope you get that number. That's one a day. We look at each and every font submitted, and so far we've approved about 1/4. So this is what it's looked like now. We've rejected about 60%, and the remaining 200 foundries are still working, or they have given up after receiving our long to-do list. Here is a short to-do list. So I think we've made a good start at getting a quality filter in place. However, there's still a lot of subpar work on the website dating back to the early days at MyFonts. So somehow we need to tell quite a few foundries and designers that their fonts, or some of them, could be removed unless they are improved. And we need to tell them how to do it. Also, we see that budding type designers have the same question and make the same mistakes, and often we write the same letters to all those people, citing the same resources time and again. There are precious few books that are really good about how to start designing type. There is in fact no English language book that I can think of that does that. So what I mentioned to Spanish-speaking people is the Cómo crear tipografías book that most of you will know, and we point people to essays and tools from I Love Typography, Underwear, Carsten Lücke, Adam Twardock, Gunlaugr Brim, and others. But we realized it would be very useful to have all that information in one place. And so we proposed to publish a series of guides for foundries. These guides will cover a broad spectrum of topics that will help beginning type designers, but can also be of interest to people who are already out there. Some guides are MyFonts oriented, but many of them can also be enjoyed by people who don't work with any distributor at all. So there we go. The first six issues should be live today, or maybe, if we are a bit slow as usual, on Monday. And here's two others. I worked with a very talented illustrator who's also the type designer portraits, Beatrice Davis in Berlin, and I did the design of the covers. And so we proposed to publish a whole series of guides for foundries. There will be other ones that are about naming, it's not out yet, some about originality or plagiarism, as it's sometimes called. And so that is a whole series that will develop over the next year or so. As I said before, there are quite a few type designers who are very negative about monotype. You'll understand I won't go into this. I'm neither an outsider nor an employee, so I'm not in an ideal position to take either position against or for, but what I can say is that there are good things to be part of a large company. At MyFonts, we were very, very limited when Bitstream was still the owner. They paid me $1,000 to come to TypeCon, and the rest I had to pay myself. So as individuals, we can now afford to personally propose small-scale quality events for sponsorship. We can invest money in things like the review team, the Foundry guides, and hire the best people we can think of to help us out. These are things that do not bring immediate profit, so we get to contribute to typographic culture, not on Monotype's corporate conditions, but on our own. Our personal views about what helps improve the state of the art and the culture of type. So let's talk about the culture of type. I'm going to do this all very quickly, because I have a lecture that could take about an hour. I'm pleased that I got the chance to get some things done, and I've hopefully done just that. But for me personally, there's a downside to it. Working as a coordinator of the review team and the editor of the Foundry Guides, I haven't been able to work on any books or articles for the last 3 years, and some of this work has been the most boring work I've ever done. So I'm planning to return a bit to aspects of typographic culture that are more spiritually rewarding. A few things about me. I'm not a black and white thinker. I believe in shades of grey. And culture for me is a very broad thing. It encompasses all the arts. It's about language, cooking, popular entertainment. It cannot ignore economics or politics. Not only does culture touch on both those things, culture touches on politics and economics, it is also conditioned by it, and it must be used to influence it. I think to foster change is part of what culture needs to do, and typographic culture is one of those cultures or subcultures. I think we should remember that graphic design was invented by artists to foster change. And some people just decided to stop being artists and become propaganda designers, let's say. This is very much about, this is a thing that I made. I should have shown this a bit before when I was talking away. It's very much about ambiguity, and I like the idea of ambiguity and of bringing stuff into your discourse that is not very straightforward. Back to my track. This is one of the artists, Rodchenko, who decided to become a publicist for the revolution, and with a writer turned copywriter, Mayakovsky. And here's one of the most interesting type designers of the 20th century. The Letterform archive has a lot of stuff by Mr. Dwiggins, and this is one of his most interesting brochures, The Crew of the Ship Earth. I don't know if you know the Spaceship Earth by Buckminster Fuller, an architect, so he was also a designer. This book is sort of similar, and it reminds people that the planet Earth is the one ship that we have that we sail on, and it sort of reminds people that to sail on a ship you have to be a team, and that is not what the human race is very good at. Sort of sounds familiar to me. I'm ranting. These are different times. I do think it's extremely necessary today to mobilize all creative disciplines, including type design, to act and do something about the surrealist concentrations of power, the indifference of politicians to anything that is not about short-term financial success. But I can understand if the type world shows little enthusiasm to try and do something about this. The world is huge and complicated and full of mistakes and flaws, whereas a typographic character is one of the smallest artifacts in the world, and the type designer has complete control of every detail. I cannot do that kind of stuff. I just don't have the talent. I like to use the skills that I have for making ideas speak clearer and in a more attractive tone, and create some confusion and consciousness sometimes. The one time I was able to do that within the type world was when I worked for Fontshop Benelux, the Belgian-Dutch branch of Fontshop. Before being taken over by Monotype, Fontshop stood for a very personal, irreverent approach to type, and Rudy, the owner of Fontshop Benelux, was the most extreme example of that. Long-haired, dressed in Harley-Davidson clothing, he asked me to create a new quarterly magazine, Druk. Druk means printing, pressure, crowded. It allowed me complete freedom. He allowed me complete freedom to fill it in with articles and images vaguely related to type and stock photography. Left is the issue about Cuba, and I commissioned an illustration from Eric van Blokland for that. And on the right is the political issue about political pressure. I do have some tendencies to subversiveness, and I like working with people who are somewhat subversive too. Mentality and attitude are more important to me than prestige. If I were a type or a logo designer, I would not be very proud to accept a commission from an automobile company. I would downright refuse to work for an oil company. And even for creative reasons, it is much nicer to be chosen to be the book designer of a new, radical London publisher than to work for, well, whatever. Repeater. I work for Repeater now. Repeater was founded earlier this year by British novelist Terry Goddard. We met this summer when my sister, who lives in Cornwall, co-organized a symposium about radical publishing. I found myself in the middle of a bunch of political writers and publishers, and I was advocating good design and well-made typography to make political work stand out. My friend Lawrence Penny, who also works for MyFonts, came driving from Bristol, and he said the same things as I did, or helped me say them. Lo and behold, Repeater wanted me as their typesetter. That's what they said, which turned out to mean designer of book interiors. I did their first 2 books. This wonderful essay about women and work in Britain. The cover is not mine, although I did consult on the lettering. This was the first version, and I said that lean out could also be read as lean 1, so that was changed. This is the most incredible novel I've read in years, and I've read it while typesetting it. This is a crazy tale about dwarves, power, murder, sex, and politics. The book is about 220 pages, and is one single sentence. So this is how a double page looks like. There's no paragraphs and no full stops in the whole book. It's a great challenge to a typesetter. So I received my briefing, and they said it's going to be easy. It's just one paragraph, and I thought it was stuck. I thought it was one repeated paragraph every page or something, and then I got the Word document, and I saw that any big change I would make in the first line would have a consequence for the last one. So it was interesting. It became also a challenge for the reader in me. So my degree is in theory of literature. I have an MA in that. And this is, 5 minutes. It's not going to work. So you can decide if I'm allowed to go over time later on. It's a very dark tale and a very strange, surrealist thing. So I thought the best thing to start with would be a black page. They were okay with that. And then I got a kind of, what do you call it, a template to work with. Do anything with it that you want. But the template had running titles, and in Anglo-Saxon publishing, that's a very normal thing to do, is to use running titles. So no, I keep that surprise. So these titles have usually the boring repetition of the book title on the left side and the repetition of each chapter title on the right side. But as this book didn't have paragraphs, it also, of course, didn't have any chapters. So I started reading, and I thought, well, this is pretty extreme. I could take the most extreme words of every double page and put them there, and then it would be kind of subtext or a supertext of the whole story, and you could use it to guide you along this crazy story. And so I made about 10 samples, and the author said, "This is what I wanted." It was a pretty radical proposition, but that sort of belonged to the new publisher. And so when the author said I wanted something like that all along, they gave me the go-ahead to write this whole text and just add 3 or 4 words to every page. And I was not corrected. Everything was okay. I don't think this has been done before. So that makes my work a lot more interesting. All of this to say that type design, this, by the way, is Veto by the Type Jockey's new typeface that I used as a secondary typeface in the book. The primary typeface is Chaparral. Everything in its place now. So there are many users like me for whom type design is part of a much larger thing. A typeface is something with details and a higher sophistication, and you can enjoy that and analyze it and admire. But it's also a tool your customers need to be able to use without obvious mistakes. Catherine already talked about that. The kind of smugness or arrogance with which type designers talk about people who make mistakes. This is a picture that she already showed, made by Lawrence Benny, above mentioned. So I show it again. It's one of those things where a typeface just doesn't work out of the box the way you'd want to, and the designer, whoever made this thing, maybe the manager, didn't really realize that he had to go into the glyph panel to find the right thing. And a lot of things in the world go wrong with type. This is an email quoted by Thierry Blancpain, type designer, that he received from some post office in 4 different typefaces within one mail. And type designers are used to talking about, those stupid graphic designers. And there are 2 main reasons why things go wrong. A, the fonts are too complicated to use. This is not the fault of the users. They're not stupid, it's in the font. Or sometimes it's in the software or in the greater technical environment in which the fonts operate. The whole thing doesn't really work together. Some applications or protocols were never developed beyond the ASCII 128 character set. This is a picture I made in the airplane. There's a guy there that plays in a movie who has a nickname, and instead of the quotation marks, there's sort of the HTML code of that. These things go wrong because there's a lack of communication between different disciplines. So same thing for complaints about why don't type designers design the new Google logo, but some designer. For one thing, type design is like any other design. It must make it difficult for people to do things wrong. On the other hand, I think there should be much more dialogue between our little group that meets in meetings and talk to each other about how nice and cute we've designed or stuff like that. We should go out more to people of other disciplines and also to the people. We should be didactic, and Enrique Narde did that with the exhibition that's up right now that I saw on Saturday. He gave a talk talking to partly designers, partly just people who walk by, about what it is to design type, where it comes from, and things like that. One of the parts where we fail our little work is in Wikipedia. Wikipedia, you can detest it, but you can also improve it. I think that's what we should do. Why has none of us ever contributed anything meaningful, including me, anything meaningful to the type design pages? They have a project typography. I don't think any of us participates. This is stupid. I'm going very quick now. Business, well, we've talked a lot about business. I think that Jean-Baptiste Levé was right in saying that when you're a type designer, when you want to run your own foundry, you will have to admit that you're doing business, not be too romantic. So that's why we included the thing about pricing fonts in our series of guides. There's the thing about pricing stuff. Many type designers think that the price of their typefaces is a very emotional thing, and it's that as much as an economic factor. They feel that relatively high pricing expresses appreciation for their work, and low or discounted prices degrade it. However, foundries and distributors cannot ignore economic reality. Like any other business, competition comes with the trade. In order to make a living from fonts, Foundry must find an audience that wants to pay for their work and buy the typefaces rather than those offered by the next one. As any economist can tell you, higher prices don't imply a higher income. The market for fonts is no exception. Recently, lower prices have helped foundries boost their income enormously by reaching a whole new crowd of occasional font buyers. So pricing is often a question of choosing your niche in the market. You can worry about very high profile clients and sell to them at a very high price. You can also say, no, I want to sell to the masses, find a new audience. And then you will have to lower your price until these people say, instead of saying $30 for a font, that'd be crazy. Say, a whole family, yes, I never had that. That looks nice. I'm not telling you how cheap it has to be, but it does help to find new audiences. And the big problem right now is that there is so much on offer. This is what Adrian Frudiger said. But there is so much. And we are now filtering out, as you've seen, about 3/4 of what is being offered at MyFonts. Still, we get new fonts that look like other fonts every day. We cannot refuse all of it. We cannot say, you in, you out, because we're just a shop, not a chop. So there has to be. We need to be reasonable, make sure that things do not get out of hand. If the race to the bottom becomes damaging, then it should be stopped. But the problem is the bottom is already there. Fonts that cost nothing and are getting better and better. So I think the real problem is someplace else. We should work harder to make people understand that it does take special skills to make type that is really good and really bulletproof. And these things sometimes also go wrong within companies. Let's start this now. Why don't I have sound? Maybe this thing is now completely empty. I have a transmitter here that said low battery a while ago. This is only 5 minutes. Can we do it with a microphone?
I guess not. It's coming.
Okay. So, David, sorry for bringing this up.
So next up is Lee, who's going to give us a whole new meaning to the phrase, "Stop twisting my words." Give it up for Lee. Welcome.
How's it going, Nick?
Hello there.
Thanks for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So one of the problems that when I'm doing design, I often come up with is choosing a font for a specific project. So here I am in Illustrator. I'm designing this poster for this workout called Murph, and everything is looking good, but I basically have just put some placeholder text for the title. And then I'll usually start trying to go through all the fonts on my system. Then I'll go to Typekit, but maybe for certain projects you want something completely customized. You don't want to use an existing font. So oftentimes what we do is we'll take some existing text, we'll convert this into outlines, and then start dragging around Bezier points. But anytime you start dragging around Bezier points and handles, first of all, it's really time consuming, and then any changes you make to a specific letter, it's really hard to have that same style be applied to all the different letters. So I want to jump over to the iPad and show you an application that we're prototyping. And first I want to explain how it works. So instead of dealing with the outline of a letter, we're instead dealing with the skeleton, or the thin center line, which defines the center of the letter. And here I have the letter P, and we can see those skeleton points are defined. And for each of those points, we derive 2 additional points on either side that controls the thickness. And when we're dealing with the skeleton, we can manipulate those skeleton points without the curves actually being affected. So let me jump over to the app. So this is still pretty early days, but here we essentially have a skeleton font which is provided, a thin center line. And then using sliders we can extrapolate, create any type of thickness that we want. We can do things like obviously adjusting the width if we wanted to create a condensed or an extended version. We can make adjustments to only a certain set of characters, like if we just want to adjust characters that actually have a crossbar, we can control the crossbar. Woo! So right now, this is cool. This is a mono-weight font, but it's not that interesting. So one of the most important things in typography is contrast of the character. This is the difference between the thin and the thick strokes in the font, and that's called contrast. So if we adjust the contrast, we can see that change into a more classic style font. If I jump into the letter A here, you can see how that works. So if we adjust the contrast, only some of those contours are being affected. And we can do things like, obviously, if we wanted to create an italics version, One of the things this is missing for this type of font are serifs. So the serifs are actually there, we just need to slide them out.
Wow. Woo!
Now we have serifs here. We can control things like the curvature, about how they connect to the stems, and a whole bunch of different controls. So I'm going to back out here and talk for a second about effects. So let's get rid of this. So you also sometimes want to apply some interesting effects to text. So if we wanted to create a thin center line in the contours, and we can see how that takes effect across the whole font, we can actually take it all the way up and then adjust the offset to create some really cool shadow effects. And also have things like deforming the path. So if I actually do this jitter, it's actually going to deform the path at different levels, so we can kind of create a stroke which looks as if it's been hand-drawn.
Wow.
Okay, so I want to focus on the problem that I defined in the beginning. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to type in the title of that poster, which is Murph, and I'm going to go ahead and just increase the width, bump up the weight. I might want to control the curvature, so any characters that have curves can be adjusted. Maybe I want to adjust the crossbars a little bit. But this workout's named after a fallen member of the military, so I kind of want a military kind of feel to this. So I'm going to apply a stencil effect to it, where certain contours are kind of moved to give an effect like a stencil. So when I'm ready to export this, right now, you can export this text as a vector, bring it in, or as a bitmap. Or you can actually export this as a full font, where all the characters in the font have taken these changes. And if we jump back over to Illustrator, I previously exported this, and I just called it Max Sneaks font. So there's that actual font file that came over from the iPad. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lee.
I'm glad you enjoyed this torture. So Adobe is going to replace type design by an app, which is today's news. Thank you very much.